Business owners, listen up. The most important thing you own probably isn't your brick and mortar. In fact, it could be sitting in a drawer somewhere right now, unprotected. We'll explain. But first, some economists estimate that nearly half the workforce is now remote, but it hasn't necessarily been the dream job people had hoped for. The growing concerns about mental health issues and how to build resilience. Expert Connections starts now. Welcome to Expert Connections. I'm Julie Holton. Even if you wear comfy PJs all day, the trade-off for working from home, long hours, more virtual meetings, and blurred lines between work and personal time. Job search site monster.com finds 69% of people are burnt out working from home. Not surprisingly, 73% say they miss in-person social interactions at work. And 64% say there are, of course, fewer distractions in the office compared to home. But even more critical, the CDC now says that 41% of adults are struggling with mental health or substance abuse. That's nearly double what had been reported before the pandemic. The question now becomes, what does this mean for business leaders and their teams? It's the topic of today's Heart and Soul Connections. Michelle Hutchinson joins me. She's with She Leads Michigan and is a master's clinical social worker in the field of education with an emphasis on building resilience, neuropsychological resilience in the brain. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Julie. Thanks for having me today.
Michelle, such an important topic because Zoom fatigue is not just a buzzword. We know the burnout is real. So tell us, how is the pandemic impacting our brains?
Yes, that's such a great question. It's really, stress, the increase in cortisol in our brains that has come from this pandemic. And that increase in cortisol can cause depression and anxiety. And then we take the social isolation into account. And we understand that our brains are really needing some additional support to build resilience and to grow healthy mental wellness.
Okay, so what do business leaders need to do about this, to build that resilience, to help their employees? And I also want to ask with parents, a lot of them, pulling double duty right now, working from home and their kids are in virtual school at home. How can parents help their child's development?
Such great questions. It really all comes down to the human advantage, making sure that we're building relational connection with one another, because that's what replaces all of those feel-good chemicals and hormones in our brain and what helps us to remain grounded. We need one another. The science tells us that. And so you can do simple things with your children, such as play with them, hug them, make sure that you're taking those masks off and giving big smiles and using really big facial expressions, even as teachers, to make sure that the brain is feeling some excitement. And for business leaders, it looks the same. How do we make sure that in a world of Zoom and using technology to connect, that we're also connecting face to face? Or if we can't connect face to face, that we're really making sure that we're talking on the phone versus just texting or emailing. All of that makes a difference to our neural makeup.
And certainly providing those resources to employees is important. Michelle, one member of She Leads Michigan has found a really unique way to guide her daughter's development during this pandemic, while also creating a really unique bonding experience for them. Take a listen to a clip from their new podcast.
You found us! Welcome to Going Against the Flow podcast, where you and your middle schooler can dive into discussing relevant topics together with us crazies.
Woo! Yeah, we are in this world, but not of it.
You'll be able to tell.
Bringing a bit of clarity to situations we face today by turning to what the Bible teaches. Here we go!
Joining us now is Rachel Doring. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Okay, Rachel, we just heard a clip of your podcast. How fun is this? Tell us what led you to develop this podcast with your daughter?
Yeah, long story short, there was a huge vacancy for podcasts for that specific generation of 10 to 14-year-olds. During quarantine, I had a huge concern for the lack of socialization for my girls, especially my eldest, who's 12. And really the spiritual development of her is crucial, because she's entering into adolescence. She needs to have support, guidance, and healthy, godly relationships. So the church was trying to be creative with ideas, as much as I appreciate their efforts of reaching out on social media, trying to be innovative with games and competitions on different social media platforms. My husband and I were really opposed to having our daughter enter into that world at such a vulnerable, impressionable age. So I had to get creative and take matters into my own hands. I explored podcasts. I wanted to find something that had biblical depth and devotions where we could connect. And it was so disappointing because I came up with absolutely nothing. There were tons of parenting podcasts and there were tons of high school podcasts, but that topic was just too heavy for Kyla, went over her head. And just the way, it's really tricky because at that age, they can go deeper spiritually than an elementary level, but they still get distracted really easily. So I looked at her and I thought, there's nothing. We've got to do our own podcast. Let's do it.
Yes. And Rachel, can you tell me a little bit, once you developed this podcast with her, how did that change or impact your relationship?
Yeah, I mean, we were able to spend more time together developing content. Her and I co-host it together, which is really unique too, because I'm able to get her perspective. I'm able to hear about topics that she's passionate about dealing with in school. She's really grown spiritually because we're tackling these topics that she doesn't talk about at school or with her friends, but the things she is talking about at school really do pertain to what we're doing on our podcast. So I can apply biblical principles to it and at her level where she can understand and grapple with things, so that in the long run, she's learning to use her faith and biblical principles to address things she's facing at school, which is going to set her up for long time success. And I mean, so growth spiritually and really time together has been amazing doing this together.
What an incredible way. I love hearing stories about this, Rachel, of really taking this challenge. You couldn't find something out there that you really wanted to help your daughter and to help her through this pandemic time. And so you just created it yourself. And we just love hearing stories like this. We wish you much success. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
All right, my pleasure.
For the link to Rachel's podcast and to hear more tips from Michelle on building resilience, head to our website, WLAJ.com, and click Heart and Soul Connections. What are your company's most valuable assets? We might first think about people and property, but there could be something important right now that you're not protecting, something that could hurt you in the future. Joining me is attorney John Mashney from Foster Swift Law Firm. Hi, John.
Hey, Julie. How are you doing?
We have to know, John, what is the most valuable asset that could be sitting around right now unprotected?
Yeah, I think one of the things we always talk about, at least I talk about with clients, is thinking about the most valuable thing in your business, most asset, what's the most valuable asset? What is it? And a lot of times they might think of equipment, they might think of a building, they might think of real estate, but very often they don't think of the thing that could be potentially the most valuable asset that they have in their business, and that's their intellectual property. And many times, if you think of the biggest companies you can think of that have 1 million employees or more, that have locations everywhere, if you look at their balance sheet or you look at some of their financial statements, literally the most valuable thing in their entire business is their intellectual property. Specifically, it could be a trademark registration, right? The goodwill in the marketplace, the name, the logo, things like that. And all that is really, if you think about it, it's intangible. So it could be a slip of paper that's a registration in a drawer somewhere, right? And that is the most valuable aspect of the business. It's incredible to think about it that way. But even if someone would come in and buy your business, what do they most want? Well, very often it's your brand, your intellectual property, right? And so we oftentimes skip over that. We think, we need to take care of the equipment. We have to have insurance. We have to protect it. but we don't think, how do we protect our intellectual property?
Okay, so can you give us a few more examples? You mentioned, trademarks. So what are some other things? Because you and I were talking the other day, and I fully admit, I thought, okay, there's something I need to talk to John about. There are things that we may not even think about that are part of our intellectual property that we really need to protect. So what are some other examples?
Absolutely. And I think just starting with something that in legal world is called a trademark, right? It's your brand. It's potentially the name of your company. What is the name that your customers know you by? That's what you would call as a trademark, right? It's how your customers identify you in the marketplace. Whether you're selling goods or whether you're providing services, it doesn't matter. It could also be the name of your product or service. What do you call it? What's on the label? It could be the actual design of the label or your logo. How about that? Your logo. It's important to protect all of those things for really two reasons. And the two reasons are, number one, you want to make sure that if someone else is using a similar name or logo or brand to you, that you have the ability to get them to stop. That they can't just do it and then take or siphon off some of your customers, your goodwill in the marketplace that you may have built up over 10, 20, or 50 or more years, right? So that's the first reason. You want to be able to stop someone else from copying you and piggybacking on your success. But the second reason is more preventing someone from stopping you from operating, right? So someone else might have a similar trademark to you, and they might send you a cease and desist letter and say, hey, your brand or your logo or your name is similar to our name, and you have to stop. And if you haven't properly protected your trademarks specifically, then it may be that they're right, that they could force you to stop using the name of your product or to change the name of your business, which if you think about it, that alone could be incredibly expensive, right? Thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of dollars or more, just depending on your business and how long you've been in business. So it's really important to look at those things and protect them when you're using them in your business. And even what I tell people is, before you even pick a name of your company, your business, or even a brand new product, there is a basic process to go through where you can do some searching and see what else is out there. So in terms of what do you do for intellectual property, to me, the most simple thing is this idea of a trademark and protecting the name of your company and the name of your products or services.
Okay, so what happens, John, if someone's watching right now and they start to search and they find that they are accidentally in violation of infringing on someone else's intellectual property? What next? And also, I guess, kind of two parts, how do you prevent making that mistake?
Well, the biggest way to prevent making the mistake is to do the due diligence up front, right? Before you're using a mark, before you're using a logo or a name, you do proper searching beforehand. And that's really pretty inexpensive, to be honest, in the grand scheme of things. But if you are in a position where you do receive a cease and desist letter or some type of, nastygram from an attorney, I don't send those ever, right? But if you do ever receive a letter from someone, you really have to analyze and make an assessment at that point. Hey, are they right? And who's justified in this case? Many times you would receive a letter because the way the law works, people have to enforce their trademarks, otherwise they lose rights to them. So it's important to always understand what's your risk. And it's very, very difficult to do that unless you talk to someone that's experienced in intellectual property, specifically an intellectual property lawyer who can help you with that.
Okay, so we have just a little bit of time left. What does IP enforcement look like? You just mentioned that we have to enforce it, but what does that look like?
So generally what you'd want to do is to have some type of watch service or just keep your eyes open, or sometimes your customers will let you know, and just be aware what's in the marketplace. And then if you find something, you can take action and send a letter and then follow up more strictly if needed.
John, thank you so much for sharing this information with us. For more resources from John and the attorneys at Foster Swift Law Firm, head to WLAJ.com and click the link for Legal Connections. From innovation to transformation, a big part of business recovery from COVID-19 is looking ahead to a post-pandemic world. We've already seen digital progress accelerate. Could you imagine life now without a Zoom meeting or an Amazon delivery? businesses need to make decisions about digital and how they're going to use this technology, or as today's experts are going to talk about, risk being left behind. Joining me now are marketing connections experts, Tim Haynes of Symposia Labs, Paul Schmidt from UnoDeuce Multimedia, and Jesse Flores of SuperWebPros. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Julie. Thanks for having us.
Tim, I'm going to start with you. It's safe to say that digital marketing is here to stay, but for many businesses, it's still pretty intimidating. Help us demystify digital marketing.
So don't let digital marketing scare you any more than you let that new iPhone or new Android phone scare you. Marketers like to throw out a lot of acronyms: SEO, CTR, PPC. I like to think, WTF are those? So at the end of the day, marketing is about working with a client, figuring out what the issues are, and most importantly, finding solutions. Marketing is about connecting. It's about conversations. It's so much more complicated and deep than just saying, buy this thing. Marketing, especially digital, is connected to every aspect of your business. Marketing and the internet go hand in hand. The internet was a revolution in communication, and COVID simply accelerated that. I'm sure we've all heard of COVID.
We all probably wish we hadn't.
Very true. Very true.
But you're right, it has changed the landscape of how we use digital and really put more people into this digital environment with us. Paul, speaking of which, I want to turn to you because you own a video storytelling agency. How does video come into play with digital marketing? What's the importance here when we're talking about creating your digital strategy?
Video has probably pushed itself even more into the forefront due to COVID. Let's just get past the COVID aspect. But, to be honest, it is part of that conversation, and maybe even be this conversation starter that Tim just mentioned when it comes to your marketing. And there's a couple of things that to really break down how video works is to look at two major things: is knowing who your audience is and how you want to reach them, and the platforms that you're using to do that. And that's where it really comes into play, because it's all about, with these conversations, with putting out your stories and the why behind your stories there. It is about what I call the AV of video production, the authenticity aspect of your story and the versatility aspect of the tool that is video, because it is very versatile in all the things that it can do in different areas of your media content, and putting it out there and putting it out for those who really want to understand what you do and how you can work best for them.
So true, Paul. And I know from our previous conversations, video really has such a high engagement level. We're talking 3 times higher or 6 times higher, depending on which platform you're talking about. So of course, that's such an important role in our digital marketing. Jesse, for you, there's a lot to be said about connection and content, but still it's a lot of techie stuff, which I know is the world that you live in with websites, but especially for people who are not digital natives. How do you manage all of these different algorithms?
Yeah, great question. I think marketing is still, as Tim and Paul said, it's still fundamentally a human enterprise, right? It's about connecting humans with content and information that hopefully helps them to solve problems that they have either in their business or that they're trying to help their customers have. That said, it's all mediated through software. And I like to tell people that software is only scary if you think it's magical, right? So remember the Wizard of Oz? You guys have probably all seen the Wizard of Oz, right? And the wizard is like this this magical, mystical creature. And then you get to Oz, and you're like, oh, it's just a dude behind a curtain. Well, software is the same way. It's just people coding stuff in order to meet a particular need. So what's Facebook about? Facebook is about being able to connect people with the information, the causes, and the humans that they care about. Instagram's got a different goal. Google has a different goal. Google's about trying to make it easy for people to find helpful answers to questions they're asking, right? So when you take a step back and say, look, I'm not really interested in optimizing for algorithms. That's not the thing. The thing is, I'm trying to help people solve a particular problem in a particular way, with each platform having its own way to accomplish that. It starts to become a lot easier. And then you start to say, okay, well, what is this platform built for? Okay, and what are the people on this platform trying to do? And how can I both help this platform, which by the way, has investors and shareholders, right? How can I help this platform be successful while communicating the thing I need to communicate to this audience or this audience or this audience here? And all of a sudden, it's no longer a mystical thing. It's about trying to connect people that have profit incentives vis-a-vis platforms with people who have real problems and need real answers on these platforms with the thing that you have to answer. And so the guiding question for me is, what is this platform about? And what can I do to reach the humans on this platform in such a way that I can add value to the platform and to those people in a way that's meaningful?
So helpful, Jesse. Of course, in order to, we're talking about the algorithms. In order to play the game, we have to first learn the rules. And that's really what the algorithms are. And they're designed to help those platforms get our content to the audience. So a great way of breaking that down. Jesse, Paul, Tim, thank you so much for your comments on this. I used to think that it was kind of magical what you guys do. Now I just know you're the men behind the curtain. So thanks, Jesse, for that. To see more from our marketing experts, head to WLAJ.com and click the link for Marketing Connections. We've poured through reports issued by states on the status of nonprofits. One thing that stands out, nonprofit managers are growing increasingly concerned that government agencies and private donors will not have the ability to carry through on funding. Nonprofit boards have big work ahead. Our Sales Connections expert, Shari Pash, joins us to talk strategic growth. Hi, Shari. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Julie. Glad to be here, and I'm excited to talk about board of directors today.
Yeah, so Shari, I know we normally talk about sales training, but board of director work, tell us, how do the two topics converge?
Julie, so many of the organizations that I train and coach with on sales, business development, sponsor development, member development, all these different things often work for a board of directors. And we found that an organization can only grow and thrive and be as good as their board. So a division of my business has kind of morphed into developing thriving boards so that the organization can thrive overall and achieve the goals that we're talking about during our training. So I love the work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So let's dive right in, because I know you have so much to cover. And like you said, a nonprofit, any organization really, is only as strong as its board of directors. So what does this look like? How can a board develop? And I want to say too, I know that because of the pandemic, we've seen a lot of changes in boards. So we know there's a lot of growth that needs to happen and a lot of development taking place behind the scenes. So what does this look like? Where do they start?
Yeah, definitely. I have clients often say, I just want to do some board training. Because through the pandemic, we've got new people on board, things have changed, things like that. So really, what does board training and development look like? It's got to be customized to every organization, obviously. But one of the big needs for almost everyone is making sure their house is in order. And what that means is to make sure that we've got meeting structure in place, that we've got kind of the governance versus management. I hear from a lot of boards or a lot of organizations where the board maybe isn't in the governance role they need them in. Maybe the HR and staff relationships and those legal aspects, policy manuals, all that stuff. We need to make sure our house is in order first before we get going too far. And a lot of people, I know, because they're new on the boards, we don't want to lose that traction that they may have started before the pandemic. So a lot of people are looking at 18-month strategy plans right now. 3 to 5 years is what we've always done, but we're starting to see we just need the next 18 months because so much has changed. It's for a lot of our nonprofits right now. So a goals session is really important, and it's really key to have these tools for your executive board and your executive director, because without some of these tools, Julie, we've got to avoid mission drift.
Okay. Well, I've heard this before. What is mission drift? I mean, I have an idea, but what is mission drift?
Mission drift is something that can impact all board meetings, executive board or full board meetings, because distractions occur, and often by members who just want that attention, who are, maybe there's a poorly defined project and it's taking on a life of its own. There's so many things that can distract. So I recommend that during board meetings, that often this question may need to be asked: does this activity or discussion matter to the big picture of governing our organization? That's a question. Does this activity or discussion matter to the big picture of governing our organization? So asking that above question it helps us to focus on what matters. But guess
Okay,
what?
so what if there are differing opinions on the board? What if someone on the board thinks that this particular topic does matter? How do you decide what to focus on?
That's why it's so important that we have the goals in our strategic plan, because we always use that as our protector. We circle back. That's a fantastic idea. Let's put that in the planning for next year. But if you don't have goals and a plan, it's very easy for someone to move your direction, to change your focus. So it's very critical that we have. And when I talk about a goals and strategy plan, it's not something pretty on the shelf. I've got this major plan. Look at all my colorful tabs. It's a working tool that you bring to the meetings. You keep on target, and it takes your organization where you need to go. They're moving into the trend is a one-page strategy plan, strategic plan that talks about your mission, your vision, your goals, your tactics, things like that. So
I like the sound of that. How many organizations watching right now? We won't raise hands, but how many have a beautifully designed strategic plan that has never actually been put to use? It's never been implemented.
exactly.
Yes, right.
Yeah. So that goal session, some of the things to focus on, I would say take 3 or 4 areas that your board really needs to work on and determine the focus area for the next 18 months, or if it's 3 years again. Public policy and advocacy, how does our board and organization impact public policy? Do our members even understand our role in advocacy? Brand development, huge through the pandemic. How's your brand changed? What do you need to now communicate to the board? What messaging do you need to create and use? Member development, Julie, every organization that has a board seems to worry about member or donor development, it seems like. Sustainable donors and members, things that are a threat to those. What does engagement mean? So truly important. Diversification, generational, key members.
Especially as we talk about, in the very beginning, we mentioned some of these stats that are coming in state by state about funding levels. And of course, that's a huge concern, particularly for nonprofits, but a lot of organizations are looking at right now. Shari, before we go, one quick thing that you just slightly mentioned, but I want to hear you say it again for our audience. You talk about the diversification, including generations. We have to be looking to the next generations.
Yes, you've got to get the next generation. This is a key piece of the diversification for members, for staff, and for board of directors, because we have to prepare for that next generation. And what are you doing with that?
Shari, thank you so much for walking through this with us. You have additional information on your website, including a look at tools for facilitating these strategic board sessions. To see more from Shari, head to WLAJ.com and click Sales Connections. Thank you for joining us for Expert Connections. I'm Julie Holton. We'll see you back here next Monday.
Expert Connections is executive produced by mConnexions Marketing Agency in collaboration with Foster Swift Law Firm. Strategic Solutions for Growth. SuperWebPros, Symposia Labs, UnoDeuce Multimedia, and She Leads Michigan. A special thank you to our Style Connections partners, Polka Dots Boutique, The Standard Spa, and Beauty by Wilder. Visit our Style Spotlight online at WLAJ.com/Expert Connections.